oddsbreaker.com proudly presents the Premium OddsCast, your home for the best fight picks, bets, analysis, and statistics, hosted by leading MMA oddsmaker Nick Kalikas, fight scientist and author of Fightnomics Kuhn, and myself, MMA journalist Brian Hemminger. Get an inside track from the experts as part of MMAoddsbreaker.com's premium betting service. Welcome to the Premium OddsCast, presented by 5 Dimes, your home for the best MMA insider info straight from the source, MMA oddsmaker Nick Kalikas. I'm Brian Hemminger, and we'll also be periodically joined today by MMA statistics guru Kuhn for all fights with sufficient data for him to properly analyze. Before we get into this weekend's action-packed UFC on Fox 9 event, let's briefly discuss how we did this past weekend. Our MMA Oddsbreaker Premium had another successful pair of nights. We were positive 6.39 units for UFC Fight Night 33, nailing a trio of 3-unit bets on Beth Correia, Clint Hester, as well as a parlay on Justin Scoggins and Ryan Bader, which we gave away for free, while we came up short with a pair of over-unders as we suggested 2-unit plays on Ryan Bader, Anthony Peroche, and Mark Hunt, Bigfoot Silva to go under 1.5 rounds, and they both managed to go the distance. We were also perfect on Saturday night as our 2-unit play on Tisha Torres over Felice Herrig for Invicta FC7 cashed, as did our 2-unit bet on Jesse Taylor over Elvis Mutapcic for World Series of Fighting 7. Both of those plays were given away for free via our Premium OddsCast Twitter account at Premium OddsCast. So make sure you're following if you want to take full advantage. All in all, our bets this past weekend were positive 11.09 units, and we've won big on both events since starting this new podcast. Okay, now let's cut to the chase with UFC on Fox 9, which goes down this Saturday night in Sacramento. Now, opening up the UFC on Fox 9 preliminary card on Facebook is a flyweight matchup pitting Darren Oyaniyama with an 8-4 record taking on UFC newcomer Alp Oskilic at 8-1. What's your early take on this one from the oddsmaker's perspective, Nick?
Well, I opened Oskilic minus 210 to come back on Oyenoyama plus 160. Now, Oskilic sitting at 5 dimes right now is minus 250, so a little bit more betting support coming in on Oskilic. Not really surprised. I figured they would come in this way, so this is a fight that I gauged, like the public betting trends, pretty good. I think the way these guys match up, striking-wise, I mean, you got to give Oskilic, of course, the edge here. He's got pretty fast hands. He's got decent leg kicks, has some power in his strikes, throws a nice left hook, which actually KO'd Antonio Benuela. So Oskilic making his UFC debut, coming off an impressive win over a UFC vet in Benuelas. I should mention that as well. A pretty well-rounded fighter, Oskilic. He's got grappling credentials to go along with his striking game. He's not really known as a striker, I should say that. He's more known as a grappler. I mean, he's got a strong wrestling background. He's very aggressive in pursuit of takedowns and top control. He's got nice ground and pound. Has a submission game to go along with it, but it's more of a Greco-Roman style grinder that he is. Now, again, his striking is improving, as evident in his last fight. Like I said, he's getting a little bit more KO power, getting a little bit more confidence on the feet. So pretty well-rounded flyweight that's making his debut in the UFC, and I'm expecting him to do okay, to be a solid flyweight. Now, he's a little bit, I think, getting too much respect as far as hype goes because he's not overly impressive in any area. So Oskilic just solid. I think he has a long way to improve his game, and he could get better, of course, because he's still young in his MMA career. Now, that being said, Oyenayama, that's really not the case for him. I mean, he's been around for a long time. He continues to improve his overall game. He's not really known for his striking. In fact, again, he's basically known for his grappling as his best attribute. He's got good takedowns in wrestling, dangerous BJJ. Even if he's on his back, he attacks with subs. So Oyenoyama, basically one of these, again, grappler, grinder style fighters that usually is able to dictate and control where the pace goes and implement his style. Now, striking is his weakest attribute. He does have a KO victory on his resume, but still, I mean, he's got a long way to go as far as putting his combinations together, putting his confidence together well, and doing damage on the feet. So that's where I think he's going to struggle if this fight plays out on the feet. Oskilic is going to have that striking advantage, and both of these guys, as far as wrestling goes and submissions go, again, Oyenoyama, I think, have a pure submission edge on him, but wrestling should neutralize each other out pretty good. So it's going to be interesting to see who has that real advantage here, and that's where this fight gets a little tricky. So I'm going to pick Oskilic because I do think, again, he's a little bit more complete at this point. Not a very confident pick because I could see Oyenoyama possibly grinding out a decision win or even taking his back and getting a submission. So Oskilic is going to be the slight pick.
Yeah, and this is going to be one where we disagree a little bit. Now, the biggest advantage for Oskilic here is age. I think he's coming in at 25 years old, so Obviously Oyaniyama 34, huge age gap, 9 years. That usually plays a big factor here. But I think in big fight experience, Oyaniyama's got Oskilic crushed. He's stepped in there against some really tough guys: Hideo Takoro, Kid Yamamoto, Phil Harris, Joseph Benavidez, 2-2 in those fights. But he is 2-1 in the UFC overall, and he looked really sharp in his first 2 fights. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt for losing to Benavidez because just about anybody would lose to Joseph Benavidez, and Oyaniyama managed to last almost 2 full rounds with him, eating some pretty nasty shots. I don't think Oskilic is even close to the level of Benavidez. So, this could be a spot where people are, undervaluing how good Oyaniyama is capable of being just because in his last fight he took on, one of the best guys in the entire division. And Oskilic, he does have some power. He is getting better. He trains out of a great camp, working with the fellow UFC flyweight Josh Sampo, who had a great debut earlier this year, and a couple other guys. So, he works with some good fighters. He's improving. He's definitely got more potential for growth than Oyaniyama, but at this stage, I would not be shocked to see that Oyaniyama is a little bit better than him. If Oskilic keeps it standing, even though Oskilic's a little, raw on the feet, I think Oskilic can definitely, outwork Oyaniyama, and, he has a lot more power there. But on the ground, if Oskilic goes to his bread and butter, if he gets into any sort of trouble or he starts to get tired and he shoots in, I think he's going to be in a lot of trouble. Mainly because Oyaniyama is very sharp on the ground, great sweeps, great submissions, great control. He does not mess around. He is a very, very talented submission artist. So my pick actually is going to be Oyaniyama because I think at some point this fight goes to the ground and that's where he takes advantage. So that's my play here for this opening card. Now we're going to move on to the regular Fox Sports 1 prelims, I believe. So we're going to move on with the first fight. This is actually a rematch between 2 UFC lightweights, Abel Trujillo and Roger Bowling. Their last fight ended in a no contest after an illegal knee, incidental illegal knee, occurred right at the end of the second round. It's Bowling 11-4, 1 no contest. Trujillo 10-5 with 1 no contest. What's your early take on this one from the oddsmaker's perspective, Nick?
Well, my opening line was exactly a pick on -120 either way. This is a tough fight. I mean, obviously in the first fight, I think the advantage went to Bowling as far as being the better overall fighter, and he was winning that fight, I think, at least on my card, up until the questionable stoppage with that knee, the illegal knee or whatever came into play. So it was basically a pick 'em last time that they fought as well. I mean, steady two-way action coming in as far as the sports books go. A lot of people split on who would win this fight, and it's almost the same way here. I mean, a lot of people, again, would think Bowling had a little bit of an edge, and I could see that because he was winning the fight. I do think, again, he's the better overall fighter, but what my caution here is Bowling, man. I mean, he hasn't performed obviously well in rematches. That's one thing that you got to mention right away. The second fact is, I mean, now a couple fights into the UFC, he hasn't finished a UFC fight, and he's got that kind of questionable cardio, questionable chin, kind of questionable heart to go along with it. And that's kind of sad because he's such a talented fighter. I mean, Bowling's striking's top notch. He mixes things up with his hands and feet well again. He's got power to go along with it. He's an exciting, technical, fun fighter to watch on the feet. He's got good grappling. He's got underrated wrestling. Has some solid ground and pound to go along with it. And again, he does also attack with submission. So Bowling, a solid overall fighter. I just wish that, again, his cardio was a little bit more consistent. I wish that maybe his chin and his toughness was a little bit better as well. That's why it's a hard fight for me to pick again here. Trujillo, on the other hand, he's not as technical as a striker, but he's a beast as far as power goes. I mean, he stays busy, throws heavy hands. He uses his knees and elbows well on the feet. So he has a lot of capabilities to finish fights with his striking, even if he's not as technical as Bowling. His grappling as well is pretty solid. A little bit slightly underrated. Has decent takedowns, decent scrambling ability, and he's kind of hard to hold down if he does get put on his back. That being said, of course, he can get dominated by superior wrestlers, as evident by Khabib in those type of fights that he's faced. But the way he matches up with Bowling here is pretty close. I mean, the ground battle is going to be pretty close. I think the striking battle is going to be pretty close as well. So a true pick-em type of fight. Now, as far as the action goes, bouncing back and forth. Right now at 5 dimes, Bowling's -115, so a little bit more support coming into Bowling. I'm going to actually pick Bowling to win the fight as well because I do think, again, he's the more technical, the better fighter overall, but not very confident in this pick because I do think there's a possibility that Trujillo makes it this fight another tough, hard fight, and as it goes in round 2 and round 3, we could see another letdown from Bowling. So that's where the caution is here, but I'm going to pick Bowling to win this fight because he is the better fighter.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things to always look out for with Roger Bowling is, he always starts out really strong. He is a terrific first-round fighter. He finishes a lot of guys early. He hurts a lot of guys early, but he fades. He fades really bad. He gasses. He slows down, and he loses that power in his punches. And then, his defenses get worse, and then he starts getting clipped. So, I do think that Bowling should be able to get the damage done early on Trujillo. So, I expect him to at least win the first round, probably win the second round. You look at the last fight, Bowling was winning the first 2 rounds most likely until Trujillo landed that illegal knee. Trujillo was starting to come back. Bowling was gassing out. Trujillo could have finished that fight at the very end of the second round, could have finished the fight potentially in the third round. So, if Bowling doesn't get a finish, you always got to look to potentially fade him if you don't think that he can get the finish. So my pick is Bowling because I do think he can win the first 2 rounds at least and win a decision or potentially knock Trujillo out. But there's not a lot of confidence here. Trujillo is pretty dangerous. He's very good if he can get his opponents close, like say in the clinch, or if he can get on top of him. He has some really good ground and pound. He's got some great knees and elbows. He trains out of a good gym. So that's what I'm looking out for. But I do think Bowling has what it takes, especially if he can just keep his distance. One of the biggest, dumbest things Bowling always does is, he's winning a fight on the feet, and then he starts shooting in for takedowns, and he doesn't have that great of a ground game, and he just wastes a lot of energy. So hopefully Bowling is starting to get a little better fight IQ. So I'm picking Bowling, not a lot of confidence in it. So let's move on. We've got another really intriguing lightweight battle between a longtime UFC veteran, Sam Stout, coming in at 19-9-1 overall, taking on Ultimate Fighter Season 14 veteran, I believe, Cody McKenzie, or no, Season 12 veteran, Cody McKenzie, at 14-3 overall. So what's the early lines on this one favoring Nick?
Well, not a big shocker here, but Stout opens up the favorite. I open to minus 265. The comeback on McKenzie plus 185. And another line that's staying pretty solid is close to my opener. Stout right now at 5 dimes is minus 255. A lot of support back and forth on this fight as well, though. I mean, Stout did bounce up to close to 300, and then now he's settled back down a little bit. So, believe it or not, for those out there that don't believe McKenzie has a shot, I mean, there are people out there that do believe he has a shot. Getting into the matchup here, I mean, obviously Stout's the veteran. He's the more proven, the more solid fighter going into this, but it's really your typical grappler versus striker type of matchup here. So that's where the danger factor comes into play here for Stout, because if this fight does play out on the floor, McKenzie has probably a little bit underrated wrestling. I mean, he's capable, obviously, to take the fight to the floor. And then once he has the fight to the floor, though, I mean, his submission game is pretty solid. His chokes obviously speak for themselves. I mean, that's the dangerous part of his game. McKenzie gets around your neck, he can end it really fast, really quick. And Stout, if there's been any flaws in his game, it's definitely if the fight does hit the floor against good submission fighters, he does tend to struggle at times. Now, that being said, Stout has improved his overall game. He has improved his takedown defense. And if this fight stays on the feet, no doubt about it, Stout will roll. I mean, McKenzie is one of those kind of unorthodox, aggressive strikers that doesn't really have much to offer, but with that unorthodox style, you never know. I mean, he could possibly land with a little bit of power, but he would have to basically get a lucky punch to be Stout in this spot. So I think that Stout will look to fend off takedown attempts, will look to keep this fight standing, and will look to outpoint or even possibly knock McKenzie out. Not very confident, though, because, again, until we see these guys match up and see how McKenzie, if he does get the fight to the ground, or how capable he is of dictating where the fight goes, maybe pushing Stout up against the fence and trying to grind him out that way. That's going to be the interesting part, because, like I said, I think he shouldn't be able to do that because Stout's takedown defense is pretty solid, and he's been working very hard to improve that. So I'm expecting Stout to be able to keep this on the feet and probably, like I said, outpoint him at least, or even get the finish here. So I'm going to pick Stout, but again, it's another spot, believe it or not, that is not a very confident pick.
Yeah, it's weird because I would say, a year ago, maybe 2 years ago even, Sam Stout, this would be the easiest fight of his career. Cody McKenzie, needs to get the guillotine and that's it. But you look at the way these guys have been fighting lately, Stout's just been in so many long, drawn-out fights, and, the wear and tear starting to show a little bit. He's had some really rough fights. I mean, you could argue that, he lost his last 5 fights potentially. He has not looked that great inside the octagon ever since, unfortunate death of Sean Tompkins. And I think really one of the big things for me is, he takes some damage on the feet. He's a little one-dimensional. He really only looks to land punches. One part of his game that he did add recently, he started working some takedowns in, mixing it up. But, if he does that, shoots in for a takedown, leaves his neck out there, Cody McKenzie's going to latch onto that and try for that guillotine choke immediately. I think one of the things that Stout does have going for him here is cardio. McKenzie really does not have very good conditioning. He slows down really bad after the first round, although he was able to, take down Leonard Garcia over the course of 3 rounds and outwork him on the canvas. But, overall, Stout should be able to keep it standing, should be able to get a decision, and should be able to outwork McKenzie on the feet. As long as McKenzie can't get Stout to the canvas, I see Stout outpointing him, getting potentially even a late stoppage due to McKenzie slowing down and taking accumulated damage. So my pick is Sam Stout, not nearly as confident as it used to be, but this is a very winnable fight for him. Now, we have another potential really exciting fight here. We've got Scott Jorgensen coming up in the flyweight division, making his flyweight debut, dropping down after his tough loss to Uriah Faber earlier this year. Jorgensen comes in with a 14-7 record, taking on UFC debuter Zach Makovsky, who comes in with a 16-4 record, former Bellator bantamweight champion, lost the title to Eduardo Dantas, got released, and he's won 2 fights since, most recently just this past a couple weeks ago against Matt Manzanares at RFA 11, and he comes in on short notice replacing John Dodson, and really, really interesting fight here in my perspective. So what's the early lines telling you, Nick?
Well, this is a tricky spot for me to open a line here. Honestly, it wasn't easy. I opened up Jorgensen minus 185, Makovsky plus 145. Obviously, Jorgensen being the UFC veteran, he's performed well against top-notch competitors. At bantamweight, he made a run towards the title there, of course, so we all know that. So we know what he's capable of. But that being said, Makovsky, man, he deserves to be in this spot, especially since the UFC's opened the doors for flyweights, because the guy is definitely a talented fighter in his own right. A tough debut to make, especially coming in off short notice, like you just said. But at the same time, that fight a couple weeks ago happened. He didn't get too much damage in that fight. He basically controlled the fight, did what he wanted to do. So you can almost look at it as a hard training session as well. So I'm not too sure if that short notice is going to affect Makovsky as much as we all think. That being said, the stylistical matchup might affect Makovsky more than anything else, because Jorgensen, what he brings to the table is really good boxing. He's got a nice stiff lead jab, powerful right hand. He throws good combinations, a nice counter uppercut, and he's aggressive, likes to push the pace. To go along with his striking, though, he's got solid grappling. He's got a good wrestling base, a very fast shot, solid takedowns overall, and decent takedown defense, and he's not easy to keep down even if you do put Jorgensen on his back. So Makovsky typically likes to put fighters on their back. He's a decent striker as well, but he does like to grind out fighters, look for submissions, and kind of control the grappling aspect of the fight. Now, as far as striking goes, he does present a few problems, though, I think, possibly to Jorgensen, and people might be counting him out. He is a southpaw fighter, so that's going to present maybe a little bit of a difficulty as far as adapting to his style, because he is a very versed striker as well. He's got good hands. He mixes in solid kicks. He's got decent timing and speed with his striking. So even if this fight takes place on the feet, I believe that Makovsky is going to be fairly competitive. If the fight takes place on the floor, it's going to go back and forth. Jorgensen, on paper at least, should have maybe the edge, slight edge in wrestling as far as top control goes, but Makovsky's so slick, even off his back, transitions, he might end up on top as well. So this is an interesting fight, and I think that I do give slight advantages here to Jorgensen. The betting public overall agrees because they've come in and bet the line now. Jorgensen's that minus 255. I do think the line's getting a little bit crazy because I'm expecting a more competitive decision here. I am going to lean Jorgensen to get the W, but again, it's not another comfortable spot. I think from top to bottom, this whole fight card has a lot of potential on dogs. I don't think it might not play out that way, but still, these are very competitive fights, and this is another one. So I am picking Jorgensen to win a competitive, probably decision, but man, you can't count fun size out.
Yeah, I completely agree. On paper, Jorgensen has a lot of big advantages here. I think in power, He definitely hits way harder than Makovsky. On the feet, he should be able to outwork Makovsky, especially in the boxing realm. He definitely is an aggressive fighter, pushes the pace, does all the right things, but you can't discount some of the advantage that and the improvements that Makovsky has shown ever since dropping down to the flyweight division, which is where he's belonged anyway. He was such an undersized bantamweight, and it showed in that fight against Dantas where, he just got manhandled. But going into this one, you look at that last fight against Matt Manzanares, and Makovsky showed so much improvement. He was throwing some spinning back fists with actual technique. He wasn't putting himself off balance. He threw good leg kicks. He's really quick. I think the biggest advantage Makovsky has here is his speed. He's going to be much quicker than Scott Jorgensen, who, to be completely honest, Jorgensen was not a very fast bantamweight, and I think that his speed is going to be even worse compared to the really lightning quick flyweights that we have down here. So maybe Jorgensen gets a little bit quicker, but he's still not going to be catching up to these guys. So if Makovsky uses a lot of movement and really utilizes that speed, it could play into this fight. On the ground, I do think Jorgensen is a more powerful wrestler, but I think Makovsky's a little bit more technical. I would not be surprised to see Makovsky try to shoot in and take Jorgensen down, and he might be able to do it. Jorgensen is much better ground and pound if he's on top. Makovsky usually works a little bit more for submissions. He's got some nasty submissions too. I mean, we saw him pull off the north-south choke against Ryan Roberts. That was really impressive, the old Monson choke. But overall, I'm really interested to see how Scott Jorgensen handles this flyweight debut. So I think coming down, that could be a factor, but flyweights usually do not gas out, so I don't think conditioning will be too much of an issue for him. So my pick is Scott Jorgensen. Not a ton of confidence in it again, though, because as Nick said, really evenly matched fight pretty much throughout the entire card as well. Now moving on, we have a very intriguing lightweight battle with longtime veteran Pat Healy coming off of his first UFC defeat to Khabib Nurmagomedov. He's taken on Bobby Green, who has been nothing short of amazing since signing up with UFC. Green has won his last two fights. Green steps in on short notice here for the injured Jamie Varner, so that could be a factor. But what is your early oddsmaker's perspective on this one, Nick?
Well, the opener was Healy minus 230, the comeback on Green plus 170. Again, a little bit more of the opener was intended because of, I think, the public opinion out there would be a little bit more towards Healy. But, man, I was wrong. The early action at the sportsbooks at 5 dimes at least came in on Bobby Green. And, it's hard to argue because at plus 170, I do find a little bit of value in Bobby Green, obviously. I mean, and I think the movement, as far as odds indicate, is probably correct. Now, a lot of times, early movement is not correct, but in this case, I can understand why. And getting into the matchup, I know, man, Healy is nothing but a stud, underrated. I mean, he's a vet in the sport, been around a long, long time. And what pleases me the most about Healy is he had to be relevant in the sport and to make a run in the UFC, even Strikeforce, whatever. He had to really improve and focus on his game, and he's done that. I mean, you could see the last couple of years how much he has improved his overall game. His cardio's better. His stand-up game's improving, which he desperately needed that to be able to compete against the top-tier guys, and he's done that. So overall, I think with his improving boxing, he likes to push forward, has a lot of power in his right hook as far as stand-up goes as well, surprisingly, because that's one area that, again, I wasn't impressed before as far as Pat Healy striking. He's kind of like a zombie, goes forward, and just kind of a plotty type of fighter, as we mentioned earlier in some other cases. But he's getting a little bit more effective, a little bit more faster, and a little bit better on the feet, and it's evident. Now, as far as grappling goes, he's always been one of the best grapplers, I mean, in the weight class for sure. He's a solid wrestler. He's got good subs to go along with it. He's got really good top game. The best thing about Healy, though, is his toughness. And, again, he just pushes the pace so much that it's hard to keep him off you. The guy's like glue, grinding you up against the fence, looking for constant takedowns, keeping his jab in your face the whole way through. So that's a difficult part about fighting a guy like Pat Healy. He might not be the most technical, but with all those things I just mentioned, makes him a very, very difficult out. That being said, again, looking over at Green, I mean, the guy, as far as striking goes, he's going to have the advantage. His boxing continues to improve. He's got super quick hands. He's got good footwork, good movement. He throws good counter strikes, and he's got a good fight IQ to go along with it. So Another part of Bobby Green's game that I really am impressed with is his overall improvement. I mean, looking back, he's almost along the same lines as Healy. Looking back at his career, he hasn't fought the same caliber of fighters that Healy has, but last couple years, he has stepped it up a bit, and his resume is a little bit more impressive. And not just that, I mean, you could see the improvement in his game. I mean, his wrestling, his cardio, his stand-up game. He's always had decent wrestling because he's more of a grappling-based fighter, but he's a lot more, I guess, capable these days. He's not really a grappling-based fighter anymore. I think he's just a complete fighter. In fact, he's a more complete fighter than Healy is, because with his wrestling and with his striking, I think he could give fits to Healy because of his speed, his footwork, and the way he's able to scramble out of bad spots. So this is another interesting fight. I realistically could see it play out either way. I'm going to lean a little bit more towards Healy because I do think his grinding style, his ability to push the pace is going to make Green just be, I guess, all over the place. I mean, his footwork, he's going to constantly be working to get away from Healy and landing his shots. And I think as far as the scorecards go, if this does hit the cards, we're probably going to see an edge to Healy. So as far as the pick goes, I guess you got to kind of, again, slightly favor Healy, and another non-confident pick.
Yeah, this fight's a little crazy. On the feet, Bobby Green is significantly better than Pat Healy, in my opinion. He works really good kicks. He's very crisp boxing, very technical, pretty good defense, and he's much faster than Pat Healy. I think the biggest disadvantage Pat Healy has right now is his speed. He's not quick, but he's really strong. He's very big, and he's imposing. He imposes his will on people. So this is all going to be about, can Pat Healy get his hands on Bobby Green? Can Pat Healy get him against the fence, get him on the ground, really grind him out a little bit, wear him down, potentially get that late submission like he did against Jim Miller, which eventually resulted in a no contest. But this is a really intriguing battle because it's a stylistic matchup. Green does have some decent wrestling, some submission skills of his own, but I don't think he wants to play that game against Pat Healy, who is very, very tough, very big, and very physical. So that's just an area that it's not worth the risk, in my opinion, for Green to play that game. Now, something to look out for with Green is he has had some bad history with landing some low shots. That last fight against James Krause, he landed 2 low blows, actually lost a point, and then the fight got stopped because he landed a shot right on the belt line and then crumpled James Krause from a body kick. But even that one looked low a little bit, so he caught some flack for that. So you got to watch out. People might not be giving him the benefit of the doubt. If he lands a low kick on Pat Healy, the ref might be looking to take away a point earlier than, say, if anybody else was doing it. So keep an eye out for that. But I do think, Pat Healy, he's very strong. And if Pat Healy can get and use his footwork and positioning to get Bobby Green in a situation where he doesn't really have a good escape route, then Healy should be able to get his hands on him and potentially get him to the ground where, at least a decision is possible. I can see Healy losing a round, maybe even 2. I mean, this is not a lock by any means, but Pat Healy is pretty good favorite here, and I like him to at least get, if he gets Bobby Green to the ground, he should win a decision. So my pick is Pat Healy, but again, not a lot of confidence in it. Now moving on, we have a very interesting matchup between 12-1 Edson Barbosa and Danny Castillo out of Team Alpha Male at 16-5 in the lightweight division. Now, Nick, this is a really intriguing battle between guys that are been around the fringe top 10, top 15 for a while now. Who do you like with this one from the MMA oddsmaker's perspective?
Well, I opened the line Barbosa minus 315, the comeback on Castillo plus 235. Line holding steady. A little bit of early action did come in on Castillo, and then as we get closer to fight time, the public coming back in and betting Barbosa. Right now, the line over at 5 dimes is about minus 320. So basically where I opened it, a lot of two-way action, and I'm sure that will continue. As far as how the fight goes, I mean, the striking you have to look at, we'll start off with Castillo first. I mean, he's got decent boxing, probably a little bit of underrated power. Defensively, for me, is the biggest concern for him, though, because he lives with his aggression. He tends to leave a little bit too many openings, and that's what gets him in trouble. I mean, if anything, his chin's a little bit questionable. But as far as boxing and, like I said, overall power, it's solid. Now, going to Castillo's grappling, obviously that's his strength. I mean, he's a very solid wrestler. He's got that strong wrestling base. He's aggressive with takedowns and pressure, good top control, and good ground and pound. So that's what he's going to kind of look to do in this fight. Now, on the other hand, Barboza, I mean, obviously we don't have to say much about his striking. It's tremendous. I mean, the guy's got power in both hands, nasty leg kicks, puts it all together very well. His grappling's still probably the biggest concern for him. A lot of question marks there. If he does get put on his back for a long period of time, how is he going to react? So that's really going to be the way this fight plays out, I think. I think it's going to depend on if Castillo can get this fight to the floor, pressure him, control the fight to get the W that way. If not, if Barboza is able to keep the fight on the feet, which I should add, Barboza does as far as the grappling department goes. I mean, again, his weakness is the floor, but he does have decent takedown defense. And if you do get him to the ground, he manages to scramble back up pretty quick, so he's hard to hold down as well. And again, if he does have decent takedown defense in this matchup against Castillo, I think he's going to win the fight because he is the far superior striker. He's a lot more dangerous on the feet, and he's probably going to get the knockout finish. It's not a good combination mixing Barboza's count striking with Castillo's flaws in his striking game defensively and with that chin. So my pick is going to be Barboza here to come through. I think he is probably going to find a spot to catch Castillo. But again, it's not anything guaranteed, as Castillo is probably the toughest test to date for Barboza. I mean, this is going to be a definite challenge for him, and I think Barboza's definitely going to improve his position in the UFC lightweight division if he does get this W, and he's going to be a serious title contender. But big step up for him. I am picking Barboza to win.
All right, excellent. Now, something that I really am interested here is the dynamic on the feet. Barboza is such an exceptional striker, and Castillo is a little vulnerable there. I mean, we've seen when he faces, guys with really good power that can keep it standing if they want, they hurt him. Obviously, Anthony Pettis in the WEC had that great head kick knockout against him. More recently, Michael Johnson had a solid come from behind knockout. So, if he gets clipped, he is that chin is not that great, especially for in the lightweight division and against somebody as accurate as Barboza. So that's something to really look out for, and that's one of the main factors that's going to play into my pick for Edson Barboza. Now, Reed, what do the numbers tell us for this one?
Well, you guys are right. Edson Barboza is a very dangerous striker. He is very high with the knockdown rate. His accuracy is actually, well, it's about average, although in this case it's higher than Castillo's. It's the knockdown power that is ridiculous. He has 5 knockdowns. Punch for punch, he's knocking people down at a higher than 10% rate, which is extremely, very, very, very high. I mean, he's a lightweight, and he has twice the knockdown rate of a heavyweight. So punch for punch, this guy is one of the most dangerous strikers in UFC history. So that is a huge thing to deal with for anyone who faces this guy standing up. On the ground, you guys are right. If Castillo can put him on his back, put Barboza on his back, that's how this fight changes completely. And so Castillo's going to try to do that. Barboza's takedown defense is actually 80%, which is better than average. It's good, and he's a high output kind of guy. So across the board, Barboza does have statistical advantages, and I think he's a justifiable favorite here. He's very dangerous on his feet, and as long as he stays off his back, he's going to own the octagon. But Castillo is definitely going to try to take him down, I think. And that's his best bet. And who's to say? Because Castillo, Team Alpha Male, these guys are getting better and better. And if he can actually turn this into a wrestling match, he's got a good chance for an upset. He just has to be able to pull that off, and that's going to be difficult.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing that really factors into this for me is the diversity of Edson Barboza's attack. The guy has that unbelievable spinning wheel kick knockout of Terry Edom, but he knocked down Lucas Martin with a jab. Rafael Oliveira, he knocked out with TKO to leg kicks, the second one in the UFC. I think he's the only fighter in UFC history that's done that. So he's so dangerous from all different sorts of areas. I mean, this guy's leg kicks, body kicks, head kicks, and then his punches are getting better every time we see him too. So I really do think Edson Barboza has a great shot here. So let's move on. I believe the next bout in this preliminary card is the only welterweight battle on the card, the only fight even over 155 pounds, featuring Ultimate Fighter Season 11 winner Court McGee taking on rising UFC prospect, undefeated Ryan LaFleur. Now, LaFleur comes in at 9-0. McGee comes in at 16-3, but he's 2-0 since dropping down to the welterweight division. So, what's the oddsmaker's perspective on this one, Nick?
My opener was McGee minus 160 to come back on LaFleur plus 120. A little bit surprised as far as the movement goes because McGee is down to minus 125 at 5 dimes. Again, the public hype coming into play. I mean, McGee is an Ultimate Fighter winner, so he's got that following to go along with it. He's been competitive and successful in the UFC middleweight division, and Brian just mentioned, I mean, since he dropped to 170, he's undefeated there as well. So McGee, basically a total package. I mean, he's got good striking, good boxing, throws a nice jab with combos together, mixes in elbows and knees, and he's extremely active. I mean, he consistently pushes forward and presses the person he's fighting, so he makes it difficult because he's constantly throwing his hands in your face, and he's got a little bit of snap to go with it. So on the feet, definitely not an easy task to deal with. Now, as far as grappling goes, McGee very solid there as well. He's got underrated wrestling, in my opinion, solid takedown defense, and if he hits the floor, he's more than capable of finishing a fight by submission from top or bottom. So McGee, solid in all areas of the game, but looking over at LaFleur, he's the same type of fighter. I mean, maybe not as technical as far as the hands and boxing goes, but the guy does definitely pack a punch. So as far as punching power goes and effective striking, I think LaFleur might actually land the more effective shots in this spot. He does utilize elbows and knees well, so he's dangerous as far as, I mean, being able to throw more than just hands in the striking realm again, and he does pack power to go along with it. Grappling, though, is definitely LaFleur's best attribute. I mean, he's a very strong wrestler, as shown since he's made his UFC debut. I mean, that's how he's been getting the job done, basically grinding out fighters, taking them to the floor, using his grappling and his submission-based game to basically control and do some damage on the ground. I mean, he does have decent ground and pound, and again, I mean, his top game, it's hard to kind of get the guy off you if he is on top of you. He smothers you well, and his fight IQ is decent to go along with it. So I know this fight is on short notice for LaFleur, but this is definitely a good spot for him because I think he can, if he does come away with a win here, he can take a lot of that momentum away from McGee and continue to be a threat at the 170-pound division. So another one of these tricky fights as far as a pure pick goes. I'm actually going to lean a little bit more towards LaFleur because with this wrestling base, with that punching power, I think he can be the more effective fighter. But again, not a very confident pick because McGee, I can see him easily being a little bit more active and getting the W that way if it hits the scorecards, because it will be a competitive fight. So that's where it comes down to, in my opinion, it's how the judges probably score this fight. If there is going to be a finish in this fight, I would think, though, LaFleur has a better chance to do that. So a few more ways to win for LaFleur. I'm going to side with him, but again, not very confident, but LaFleur's my pick.
Yeah, and I agree here. The main reason is, while Court McGee is an incredible story, the former drug addict has come forward and, turned his career around with in mixed martial arts, changed his life, winning the Ultimate Fighter, and, putting on great fights in the UFC. The thing that he's got going against him, he had some injuries. He had a really bad knee injury that kept him out for, almost a full year. And something else is, I'm a little concerned about his athleticism. Like, while he does have a great gas tank and he can push the pace on the feet, I don't think he can shoot in and get takedowns anymore. He really hasn't done that a whole lot since returning from the knee injury. And, he really just needs to keep this fight standing. I mean, we saw in his welterweight debut against Josh Neer, I think he set a UFC record for the most significant strikes thrown or landed in a 3-round fight ever. I mean, it was insane, his output. So if he can get into a comfort zone here against LaFleur on the feet, he's going to be outputting a ton of strikes. Now, as we've seen some from Reed Kuhn's statistics and the significant strikes thrown per minute, that does favor the fighter that's always throwing strikes like that. That being said, what Ryan LaFleur has going for him is, he's a bit of the complete package. He is a great fighter, but don't be thrown off by the fact that he's had 2 unanimous decision victories in his first 2 UFC fights. I mean, yeah, they were against Ben Alloway and Santiago Ponzinibbio, but these were fights where LaFleur wasn't just laying and praying on these guys. I mean, he shoots in for takedowns, and when he gets on top of you, it is constant improvement. He's looking to pass your guard, get to a dominant position, drop some punches. He's mixing in elbows, knees, ground and pound the entire time, looking potentially for submissions at all times. And when he's on the feet, he's not a fish out of the water. I think LaFleur is pretty technical on the feet. He throws good kicks. He throws pretty sharp punches. He can hold his own with some pretty tough guys. Ponzinibbio was a pretty talented kickboxer out of Brazil, and he goes into Brazil and beats him, handily. And I think he was beating him on the feet most of the way too. And he has pretty good defense. He has been clipped a couple times, but I think he recovers well. His fight IQ's there, and he has very technical takedowns, very athletic takedowns too. He can grab single legs, he can grab body locks, he can get double legs, you name it. And I don't know if I can trust Court McGee's surgically repaired knee to be able to fend these takedowns off for 3 straight rounds. So that's why I'm picking Ryan LaFleur, and I think you should too. Now moving on to the main card of UFC on Fox 9, we have a very intriguing battle between two former Ultimate Fighter Season 5 and Season 6 members in the lightweight division. Joe Lauzon at 22-9, taking on Mac Danzig with a 21-11-1 record. Both these guys are coming in off of tough losses and are both in desperate need of a UFC win. Now, Nick, what's your oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
Well, my opener was Lauzon -210, the comeback on Danzig +160. And again, based on my opening line, a little bit inflated towards who I think the public would kind of back a little bit more so in this fight. Because Danzig, I mean, coming off that brutal knockout loss to Melvin Gillard, of course, did not sit well, I think, with people. I mean, the way he just lost. I mean, obviously, Melvin's striking is just tremendous as well. I mean, he's got tremendous knockout power, and he could do that to a lot of people. But the way it all went down, I mean, he was out cold, got up and crying, all that stuff. I think that really, I mean, it's sad to say, but that affected a lot of people's opinion on Danzig, and it kind of brought his stock down even more so. That's not really fair to say, because I think overall Danzig is a pretty solid fighter. Definitely deserved to be in the spot where he has been in the UFC. He's got underrated striking. His boxing's decent. He stays busy, has some power, a little bit underrated power as well, likes to push forward. So on the feet, he's not exactly out of his realm. Again, it's a talented striker, of course, like we just said against Melvin Gillard, somebody like that, of course, he's going to get outmatched. But that being said, he's not out of his realm in the striking area. Now, grappling, he's a talented ground guy as well. He has decent wrestling, decent takedowns. He looks for subs and is capable of finishing on the ground. So he's kind of the total package. He just doesn't really excel too much, and he's not really a dangerous threat in any exact area, although he is a pretty solid fighter. That being said, you can look over at Lauzon, and he's basically a similar type of fighter. I mean, he's very well-rounded. He's fun to watch as a striker. Not the most technical at times, but he is aggressive, and his boxing and overall striking game is getting better. He's got decent hands and feet. Defensively, though, again, it's an area where he's a little bit flawed because his aggression does tend to leave a little bit too many openings for my liking, and Lauzon does tend to get tagged. But that being said, it should be a fun firefight on the feet. These guys are going to be going back and forth for sure, and it should be competitive. Now, the grappling for Lauzon, he is a ground whiz. He's got solid wrestling as well. Very dangerous sub game, of course. If there's going to be a sub in this fight, both of these guys are definitely capable of finishing. But I think you got to give the slight edge to Lauzon as far as getting that submission W and the danger factor goes. I think he's just a little bit more offensively talented as far as subs go. His takedown D is decent. It's improving for sure as well. So again, both guys very well rounded. Should be a very close competitive fight. But I do like Lauzon's improvement recently more so than Danzig's. I think Danzig, mentally, I question a lot of where he is right now. I mean, he's coming off that devastating loss. There was talks possibly about retirement. And Lauzon, actually, to me, if you look back at his last few performances, you can see some progress in his game. His cardio is improving. Again, his footwork, his overall stand-up is improving, and he's always been dangerous on the ground. So not a very confident pick, but you do have to go with Lauzon in this spot. I think he's just, at this stage, probably the better fighter, and he should get the W here.
Yeah, and I agree partially, just mainly because I think Lauzon is in a better place in his career right now, especially mentally. But what really scares me here is, in Lauzon's last fight, everybody was picking him to go in there against Michael Johnson and just tap the guy out in a minute or something. And he was a complete punching bag for 3 straight rounds. And then I'm all wondering, is he going to have a bunch of excuses? Did something go terribly wrong in camp? And he comes out and says, no, everything in camp was fine. I was great. I don't know what happened. That scares me a little bit. The other part about that is, just because he had so many wars in 2012, Jim Miller, Jamie Varner, both got nominated for Fight of the Year, both won Fight of the Year in different award ceremonies, and that's a lot of punishment he took in 2012. He got knocked out by Anthony Pettis. In Jamie Varner fight, he got blasted a lot, came back and got the submission. And in the Jim Miller fight, he got lit up before coming back in the 3rd round. So that is something to really worry about, the damage he's taken, because he looked like a walking zombie in that Michael Johnson fight. He looked terrible. So is he going to come back? I mean, he's had plenty of time to recover and rest and hopefully, get back into fight shape, but that is a concern for me. And then on the other side, Mac Danzig, he's a guy that's always kind of been a middling UFC lightweight, but he has not looked very good lately. I do think that he is a little bit better than Lozon on the feet, but, he lost to Takanori Gomi. He got just blasted by Melvin Gillard. So I'm questioning his motivation where he is right now, and I think Joe Lozon just wants it a little bit more. But if Mac Danzig keeps on the feet, this could get interesting. My pick is Lozon, not crazy confident in it. Now, what do the numbers tell us, Reed?
Well, you guys are right. Both these guys are well-rounded. I do think that Lozon has the more dangerous submission game. But Danzig, his stats on striking are actually really good. And it's kind of surprising because I didn't really think of him as an exceptional striker. And then I look at the stats, and he's accurate with his jab. He's accurate with his power hand. He uses good volume. I'm surprised by that. And Lozon, he has knockdown power, and he has done it before, but his accuracy stats are low. He tends to not put out a lot of volume, which is why he loses some of these decisions. He just gets outworked. And so that's concern on the feet. So I think you guys are right. The question mark is what happens when this goes to the ground. How good is Danzig's defense? How good is Lozon's offense? Because I think that's going to be the war. I think Lozon is going to be the one going after submissions and throwing them at them. He's done it before, and literally he has a very high submission attempt rate. He throws these things. He throws the kitchen sink at people. He does a crazy, jumping heel takedown where he, latches his legs in there. He's got some cool stuff, and he's very gifted in submissions. Can he get the fight there, and how good is Danzig in defending? Because I think Danzig is a little bit more resilient than Michael Johnson or some of Lozon's past opponents, like Jamie Varner, when it comes to submission defense. So that is a concern. And the things that are, I think, leaping off the page here is that Danzig's stand-up game is actually pretty solid, and I did not expect to see that.
All right, excellent. And both these guys have their back against the wall, so a lot of pressure on them, too, coming in with 2 UFC losses. They do not want to get that third loss in a row, especially Danzig, because I think Lozon might get the benefit of the doubt due to his excitement level of his fights. Now, moving on, we have a really intriguing featherweight battle between number 1 ranked Chad Mendes, coming in with a 15-1 record, 4 straight wins since losing his title shot, 4 straight knockouts, taking on Nick Lentz, who comes in 24-5-2 with 1 no contest overall. He's won 3 straight ever since dropping down to the featherweight division. So both of these guys are on a big roll. But what's your oddsmaker's perspective here, Nick?
All right, well, here we go with this one. I opened Mendes minus 380. The comeback on Lentz plus 260. Kind of smirking while I say that because most of you guys out there know what I'm talking about. When you look over at the line right now at 5 dimes, Mendes is minus 900. The comeback on Lentz is plus 600. So, yeah, I kind of bombed this opener as far as the line goes. But you know what? It's hard to gauge a little bit with how much hype and how much respect people are going to get in this spot because both these guys are tremendous as far as talent goes. They're both well-rounded. They're both very capable of getting W's, obviously. I mean, Mendes has been on an extreme roll. He's looked like the best, outside of Aldo, of course. He's looked like the best 145-pounder on the planet now for a while. I mean, he just keeps on improving his overall game. But that being said, Lentz, since he's dropped down to the featherweight weight class, I mean, he was a solid lightweight. I mean, he's been on an extreme roll in featherweight, too. Very solid wins. And the guy's putting his wrestling together and his striking game together well. I mean, he can be very effective at 145, and he's proven that. So, misgauged a little bit, obviously, of how the public was going to react to this fight. I do understand why they're coming in strong on Mendes. I mean, I'm sure a lot of the initial action at minus 380 were straight plays, but now the books are getting more parlay action. So we keep on increasing it a little bit, try to fend off the parlay action on Mendes, because I do believe, like, as far as matchups go, this is a tough matchup for Lentz because, you know what, everywhere you look in this fight, Mendes should have the advantage here. I mean, if you look as far as the strength factor, that's the obvious one here. I mean, Mendes is a beast. He's fast, powerful. He's got decent hands, and he keeps on improving as far as his knockout power and his confidence level on the feet. He's developing into a very dangerous knockout artist, and he kind of lacked that early on in his career, but he's picking it up. And of course, with Dwayne Ludwig and crew over there at Alpha Male, that's only helping his game. Now, grappling, he's probably the best wrestler at 145. I'm saying probably, just in case there's some margin of error out there if I'm wrong. But, I mean, outside of Mendez, I really don't see anybody being a far superior wrestler. So the guy has tremendous takedowns. He's got great takedown defense. In fact, I can't even remember a time that he's actually been put on his back. So he's going to have the advantage as far as power goes. He's going to have the advantage where this fight goes because I think he can put Lentz on his back. That being said, Lentz, again, very talented. He's a decent striker. He mixes up everything well with his hands and his feet. He likes to push forward. He's very aggressive. And, of course, he's not out of his realm when it comes to grappling and wrestling because he does look for takedowns. He's a solid grappler on top or on the bottom. So even if Mendez gets Lentz on the ground, he's got to be a little cautious because Lentz does like to go for subs. He's got a nasty guillotine, of course. But he's more dangerous, of course, on top. So that's kind of where this fight's going to play out. I think Mendez is going to dictate where it goes. If he's not liking how the striking goes, he can be able to put Lentz on his back, probably control it that way. I think there's a good shot of Mendez landing that knockout punch and continuing his role as well. I know a lot of people were coming in early on the under there. I'm not necessarily sold on that because I do believe Lentz is probably a little bit tougher than most people think, but I can't see Mendez, if there's a stoppage in this fight, it being Mendez knocking him out as well. So I do agree with all the early action as well. We've, again, increased the line, so we kind of keep people off the parlays there. I don't think we're going to, though. I mean, Mendez is going to be everybody's favorite parlay key this weekend, and there's not going to be much we could do about it, and I do think he's going to get the W. So can't blame you there. I think the lines get a little bit wacky now, maybe a little bit too much disrespect to Lentz, but I do agree, and I am picking Mendez to win this fight because he should win it.
Yeah, and Mendez hands down should win this fight. I like Nick Lentz. He's a great fighter, a lot of heart, and I think against most guys at 145, he's going to give them a really rough time. But this is just a nightmare matchup for him. You know, Nick Lentz is a guy that is all about pressure, moving forward. He grinds on opponents. He gets them against the fence. He gets them on the ground, wears them out. He's not going to be able to do that against Mendez. The only place I could possibly see him having an advantage here is against the fence. Mendez does not usually get caught up against the fence, and the one time he did against Aldo, he ended up getting knocked out. So there is potential that Lentz could, use the fence to his advantage a little bit, but Mendez overall, he's going to be better when they're in open distance. He's going to be better when they're doing scrambles on the ground. Mendez has a really, pretty solid guillotine choke too, obviously from Team Alpha Male. So that's something to look out for. And then obviously the knockout power, he has displayed it tremendously. And for people that were thinking that he was just knocking out cans, in his last two fights, he absolutely blistered Darren Elkins in a minute. And then he took on Clay Guida, one of the toughest guys in UFC history, who had never been knocked out, and knocked him out in the third round. So he's still knocking out guys, even at the higher levels, both back-to-back top 10 opponents that he knocked out. Now, Reed, what do the numbers tell us for this one?
The numbers are actually surprisingly positive for Nick Lentz. I mean, he's I think as good as he should be for being on a position in this type of card. Chad Mendez is solid across the board. His ground stat is ridiculous. He's basically never been put on his back for even any appreciable time. So when it comes to the wrestling, very solid. And then when it comes to the striking, they have similar accuracy, but it's the power that Mendez has. He is knocking people out. He has 4 knockdowns to his credit. He only has 1 against, and that was against Jose Aldo. Whereas Nick Lentz, he's only scored 1, but he's been dropped 3 times. His head strike defense is the worst on the entire card, and that is a major concern when you're fighting a guy with huge power like Chad Mendez. So at the featherweight level, normally you can afford to maybe have a little bit lower head strike defense because there's not quite the knockout power in these matchups. Not so with Chad Mendez. The guy packs a lot of power, and that is a dangerous hole to have in your game, to basically be letting opponents land almost 40% of their power strikes, which is almost double the UFC average. So that one stat on the page tells me that if this stays standing, it's not going to go well for Nick Lentz because normally he can afford to play that game. He's accurate himself, but if he gets hit by Chad Mendez, and it's going to happen with that type of defense, it's not going to go well for him.
Mm-hmm. And just from my tape study, I think there's a huge speed advantage for Chad Mendes too. Nick Lentz is not very quick. He's a little slow in plotting, and I think Mendes could definitely take advantage of that if they're in open space. So keep an eye out for that, especially if Mendes is able to keep this standing. Now moving on, we have a really intriguing bantamweight battle, probably one of the best bantamweight matchups of the entire year. Uriah Faber coming in as the number 2 ranked bantamweight in the world, taking on Michael McDonald, who is the number 3 ranked bantamweight in the world. And the only reason these guys aren't ranked higher is because we've got a bantamweight champion and a bantamweight interim champion that are unable to be ranked lower. I mean, both these guys are absolute studs. Faber comes in on a huge roll. He's won 3 straight fights, very impressive fashion against Ivan Menjivar, Scott Jorgensen, and Yuri Alcantara ever since losing his title shot last year. And then Michael McDonald lost the title shot at the beginning of the year to Hayden Barao, and since then had an amazing performance against Brad Pickett, almost finishing him in the first round and then winning by second round triangle choke. So Nick, where'd you open this one, and what have the lines been kind of telling you here?
Okay, unlike my Mendes opener, this line has been staying steady. I opened Faber minus 160, the comeback on McDonald plus 120. Now, looking at the line over 5 dimes at the time of the recording, Faber is minus 150. So, again, a little bit of movement towards McDonald, but not really. I mean, they've gotten a lot of two-way action. In fact, early action did bounce the line up to Faber. I think he was close to 2-1 or so, and then it's kind of came back down a little bit, sorry. So, a lot of support both ways, and I think we're going to continue to see that because it's a great matchup. I mean, you definitely have 2 of the best bantamweights in the world going at it. Both of them recently have been on a decent roll. A lot of people believe Faber, outside of championship fights, is the man. I mean, he's proven that. He's one of the best fighters consistently in the UFC. So you got to love that about him. But McDonald, on the other hand, man, I mean, he's a true phenom. I mean, look, he's already had, obviously, his title shots, and he's always going to be one of those fighters that's in the mix. He's only 22 years old, and, I mean, what he brings to the table is spectacular because the guy's a long-rangey striker. He's got dynamite in his hands. He's got good timing, good accuracy. So striking definitely McDonald's best attribute. And I think if he matches up with Faber on the feet, Faber's going to have some advantages as far as speed goes. He puts together hands and foot combinations pretty well. So it's going to be competitive on the feet, but make no mistake, McDonald will be the more dangerous, more powerful striker. So I don't think Faber's going to want to play out this fight to play out too much on the feet. I think he's going to, of course, want to look to take this fight to the floor. Now, that's where McDonald does have, if any weakness at all, it is his wrestling defense. It's not bad. It's probably better than most people think, but against solid wrestlers that are able to get the fight to the floor, he can be put on his back, even though he is dangerous off his back. So we have to also take that in consideration because McDonald, I mean, with triangles, as evident in his last fight, with arm bars, that kind of stuff, he's very active and always looks to submit guys off his back if he's put in that spot. Does look to stand up as well, so he's got a decent scrambling ability. But against Faber, I don't think that's going to be a problem because Faber has such good top control. Faber also is submission savvy enough that I don't think he's going to get caught in McDonald's submission game off his back. And Faber, again, is going to look to probably put him there. So that's going to be the key factor here. Can McDonald stay off his back, and on the feet, can he implement his game plan to get the W here with his power edge that he's going to have as far as striking ability? Again, I think Faber's a tough guy, not easy to stop, but in my mind, I do see McDonald finding an opening and possibly putting Faber out here along the way. So I'm going to actually pick McDonald to win this fight. I think that he is going to do enough to be able to keep this fight standing a little bit more than people realize. I think Faber's not going to have his way with him as much as you would think, and I think McDonald is going to eventually land that KO type of punch. If not, he's going to be competitive enough that will be a very close decision. So I do like him in this spot. Faber hard to pick against. Not very confident pick, of course, because Faber is such a stud, but I am going to go McDonald's way here.
Yeah, and another factor coming in here is age discrepancy. Michael McDonald is one of the best rising up-and-coming fighters in the UFC in general, and he's 22 years old. Uriah Faber's 34. There's a specific time where guys start to drop off a little bit, and the lighter weight you are, the bigger the drop and the earlier the decline. We haven't really seen it much from Faber. He did get tagged in the first round against Yuri Alcantara. That scared me a little bit. But, his time is going to come. Father Time wins every single battle ever. So the big thing here is trying to find that moment where it's going to factor in and it's going to matter, that age. So, and I think this fight is a great chance to see that because Michael McDonald is one of the most powerful bantamweights in the entire planet. Great one-punch power. really nasty. He hurts people when he hits them. So if he connects with Faber, I think Faber's going to be in a lot of trouble. And on the ground, I do agree, Faber should be better. But one of the main things to look out for here, for me, is it's a bit of a race against time. Michael McDonald is one of the most dangerous fighters in the UFC in the first round. He can hurt his opponents really badly. We saw what he did against Pickett in the first round, a guy that's, I don't think, ever been really knocked out, and he just blistered him in the first round. Wasn't quite able to finish him. But you look at Miguel Torres, you look at Alex Soto, the guy just steamrolls people in the first round. So if Faber can survive that first round, there's a chance that he could end up coming back and getting a decision, because McDonald does slow down a little bit over the course of the fight, and there is a chance that if Faber gets out, he might even lose the second round potentially, but I definitely would see Faber winning the third round, if not potentially getting a stoppage there. So that's something to look out for, something to be cautious of. But I am picking Michael McDonald to win this. I think youth prevails here, but you got to watch out for that veteran experience and the conditioning of Faber, which almost always comes through. Now, Reed, what do the numbers tell us here?
Well, it's actually really interesting here. This is an awesome matchup. I'm really looking forward to this fight. Uriah Faber, the California kid, is actually the oldest guy on the entire card. He's 34 and a half. He gives up 12 years on McDonald, and so you pointed that out. That is significant. I mean, that is normally a huge advantage for the younger fighter. McDonald has very good knockout power. He's got crisp striking. So where's the hole? The hole, I think, is that he does spend a lot of time on his back. Now, he's dangerous with submission, so he may be okay with that. That's how he actually finished Pickett after dominating him on the feet. So Faber has to be careful, because if he's a wrestling-centric kind of guy, he's probably going to end up in top control, and that makes it dangerous to be in, because McDonald's just going to start throwing up all sorts of submissions. I think Faber is more experienced, though, and where the youth advantage normally favors the younger guy, it's because of knockout power, not because of submissions. Older guys don't get submitted as often as younger guys, so Faber should have the experience edge. He should have the submission defense, and so if he can grind out on top, that does favor him. I don't think he's going to get submitted easily, certainly not in the beginning of the fight, and then of course the likelihood of getting submitted goes down with each round. And so McDonald, if he plays that game, if he goes onto his back and thinks he's going to rely on submissions, that's a dangerous game to play, because as the fight goes on, it's going to get harder and harder, and Faber is not going to go down easy. So I agree with you guys. I think on the feet, the stats definitely favor McDonald. He's more accurate, he's more powerful, and he has yet to be dropped. He's scored 6 knockdowns already. As a bantamweight, that's really high. His knockdown rate is way higher than a heavyweight. So he definitely has the power edge, and he's got the accuracy edge, and he also has the pace edge. So standing up, this doesn't look good for Faber. I think he's going to have to make this dirty. He's going to have to clinch a lot, wrestle, and stay out of submissions. But Faber is the kind of guy that can actually pull that off. So it's a super close matchup. I'm certainly identifying Michael McDonald as a very live underdog here, just based on the stats.
All right, excellent. Now moving on to the main event of the evening, UFC flyweight title is on the line. We've got Demetrious Johnson, the champion, coming in, taking on Joseph Benavidez. Johnson has already defended his title twice. He comes in with an 18-2-1 record. Benavidez lost the battle with Johnson in their first fight by split decision back in 2012, but has since scored 3 very impressive victories, and he comes in here at 19-3 overall. So, Nick, this is a rematch, so what are the public kind of favoring here since you opened the lines?
I opened Demetrious Johnson -140. The comeback on Benavidez, even money. I'm looking at the line at 5 dimes, staying steady. Demetrious Johnson still -135 or so. And I think we'll see continued support on both fighters here. So that's why you didn't see a lot of movements early on this fight, because both fighters are getting wagered heavily. So it's going to continue, but I do expect the line to go a little bit more in Benavidez's favor. So Johnson probably will drop slightly as a favorite. This is probably going to end up almost exactly at a pick 'em by fight time, I would think. Getting into the matchup, though, I mean, these guys are definitely, obviously, the best 225-pounders in the world. I mean, they competed not long ago for the flyweight title. Johnson won that match. I believe he won it. I mean, it was a split decision on cards. It was a very competitive, close fight, but Johnson deserved to get the W here. There, I should say, and there's no argument about how that result went. And that being said, I think Benavidez is a very dangerous opponent for him again. I mean, he could obviously keep the fight close as he did the first time. His striking is legit. He's a southpaw, which it tends to be a little bit difficult for some orthodox fighters at times. He's very fast, very explosive, huge power. So we know what Benavidez brings to the table as far as striking goes. He puts his combinations together well, and he can knock you out, no doubt about it. His grappling is another attribute that is awesome. I mean, he's got great wrestling, great takedown defense. He's capable of obviously grounding and pounding, controlling fights, finishing a fight on the floor as well. He's got dangerous, powerful submissions. So Benavidez, anywhere this fight takes place, is one of those fighters that he's not just average, he's above average. I mean, the guy excels. That's why he's in this spot. That's why he's fighting for the world title, and that's why he deserves to be here. That being said, I think a lot of people are underestimating DJ. I mean, Demetrius Johnson, again, you got to look at his striking. His speed is top-notch. I don't think there's anybody in the division that's actually quicker. And that's hard to say because there's so many fast, obviously, competitors at 125, but DJ definitely leads the way. He mixes everything up as far as the striking goes so well that it's hard to really predict what he's going to hit you with next. I mean, he's in and out. He counter-strikes well. He's got great footwork, great fight IQ. Love that about DJ. And then as far as the ground goes, I mean, we got to go back to his speed. His shoot is so fast. I mean, he has good timing with it as well. So his wrestling is top-notch. He's got great takedown defense as well. He attacks with subs on the ground, exactly similar to Benavidez. Might not have that power effect in the sub game, but still has maybe more of a technical edge. So again, a very solid, complete fighter. One of the best in the UFC, pound for pound, by far, is DJ. So I think you got to go with the champion here. I know it's going to be competitive, close fight. Benavidez might have more ways to win because I don't think Johnson stops Joe B, but I do think Benavidez has a possible chance, of course, with that power to stop Johnson. And then if it hits the cards, it's going to be one of these really tight, close decisions. Judges will play a factor in here. I mean, last time they did it was a split decision. Like I said, I believe DJ did win that fight, and they almost gave it to Benavidez. So have to factor that in as well. But I do believe that Johnson is a little bit better, and it's going to show again in this fight. I think he's going to win more rounds. I don't know if the judges are going to give it to him. That's the dangerous part about possibly betting this fight. But as far as the pick goes, I'm going to go with Johnson. I mean, I haven't seen too many people supporting Johnson out there. Most people are picking Benavidez. I think they're on the wrong track. Got to back the champion here because, to me, he's still the best 125-pounder in the world, no doubt about it.
Yeah, and I agree. Demetrius Johnson, to me, is so well-rounded, such a complete fighter, and every time we see him, he gets a little bit better. But what I really like about him the most is he's able to adjust on the fly to a lot of the things, the problems that his opponents present. You know, John Dodson really hurt him early. He comes back. He just changes things up a little bit. He is able to avoid the big power shot from Johnson, and then from Dodson and outworks him. You know, Benavidez gave him some trouble in their first fight. He makes the adjustment. Benavidez keeps doing the same thing. Johnson starts shooting in takedowns whenever Benavidez goes for the big shot, and he outworks him and gets the decision. So the adjustments of Demetrius Johnson play a huge factor in here. You look at Joseph Benavidez, he's a kind of a guy that he comes in with that set game plan and he kind of just keeps doing. He doesn't really change things up a whole lot. So that's something that could play a big factor into this. Obviously, Benavidez has the power advantage. If Benavidez clips Johnson, he could knock him out. But, I'm not going to take anything away from the heart of Demetrius Johnson. He got hurt pretty bad against John Dodson a couple times, and he just would not give up. There's this refuse to quit attitude with him that I love. And, overall, while people praise Joseph Benavidez's wrestling ability, he doesn't really use it that much anymore. It's more he uses it defensively if he wants to keep it standing, or maybe the threat of the takedown to put a little fear at his opponents to really hurt them on the feet. So that's a lot of stuff to take into consideration here, but what I really love about Johnson is, he mixes up the kicks, he's very fluid with his combinations, he's quick, he gets out of the way usually, and when his opponents load up, his timing on his takedowns is about as good as anybody in the entire promotion. So he's not great at top control, but he just can repeatedly shoot in, and he does not get tired. I don't think Benavidez has a bad gas tank by any means, but Johnson could push him to the limit here, and that is also why I am choosing Demetrius Johnson to retain his title. Now, do the numbers back us up, Reed?
Yeah, they do, and what's interesting is that the first fight basically went by the numbers. Johnson was the one who landed more strikes, but it was Benavidez who definitely threw a lot more volume. And so when it comes to stand-up striking, Benavidez tends to control the cage. He throws a high output, but he's not very accurate. And so in their first fight, it played out exactly like that. Benavidez was pushing, but he just wasn't landing. And Johnson's defense is really, really good. He is very hard to hit. He has some of the best strike defense on the card. So if history repeats itself, or if they even play to what these stats are saying, we'll see a very similar fight. It should be very competitive, should be high-paced, and Benavidez is going to work and push, but he might not land as much. And so usually the judges are a little bit dubious in terms of accurately rewarding people who land versus throw a lot. We'll see if they got it right in that one in the first time they fought. But you guys mentioned the power that Benavidez has. If it ends early, chances are it's probably Benavidez the one that finished it. His knockdown rate is very high. He has 6 knockdowns to his credit. Johnson only has 2, but he's also been dropped. He's been hurt. We saw it against Dodson, another southpaw with a lot of power, by the way. So if Benavidez gets it on the feet for long enough, 25 minutes is a long time to go back and forth. Benavidez certainly has a chance to hurt Johnson at some point. The question is, how improved is he from that last meeting? Because the stats just read perfectly to what their first fight was, which was Benavidez trying very hard but not necessarily landing a lot. If he's improved, that could change. That could be the whole difference here. If he even improves a little bit in his accuracy, he's going to start owning this. If he can be at least equal in the stand-up exchanges, he's going to have more power. And so for that reason, that's very interesting to me. Benavidez is an underdog with more power and more volume. The question is, can he land? And so I think the first round is going to be very telling. If we see him start hurting Johnson early, that's going to be a layup right there. He's improved his game enough. If it starts playing out exactly like last time, it could be a long 5-rounder, but at least an action-packed one.
Thanks, Reed. Okay, everyone, that's going to do it for Part 1 of the Premium OddsCast. Keep an eye out for Part 2 if you've signed up for MMA Oddsbreaker Premium, which features our premium bets for UFC on Fox 9, and there are several fights we really like. Also, make sure to follow @Premium OddsCast on Twitter, as we'll be giving away our free play tomorrow night after weigh-ins are completed. If you'd like to skip all that and get an email notification of our free plays, make sure to send an email to picks@MMAOddsbreaker.com, and we'll add you to our mailing list. Big thanks to 5 Dimes for the support. So for myself, Brian Hemminger, and my co-hosts Nick Kalikas and Reed Kuhn, this is the Premium OddsCast signing out. Happy betting, everyone.